Father Hayes, and we are continuing our series of videos on the Mass, and we are continuing to develop this context for going into the Liturgy of the Eucharist, to take those different themes or threads and weave them together to form the greater tapestry, that greater revelation of God about the Mass for us. So today we're going to talk about the second most significant rite or sacrifice or event within the Jewish liturgical calendar, and that is the Day of Atonement. So if the Passover is that definitive historical event, which is continually made present to the Jewish people of their liberation, the liberation that God brought about for them from the slavery of Pharaoh, the Day of Atonement, which is given by God, as instructed by God in Leviticus chapter 16, that this is the most solemn day of the Jewish liturgical calendar. And it is the primary cleansing rite for the entire people, the entire nation. And it not only cleanses, but it consecrates. Or consecrate means to make holy. So it cleanses and consecrates the entire people, the entire nation. So the Hebrew word for kippur translates into atonement, but it actually means something closer to purgation, purification, or expiation. Now, I'm getting a lot of this material from research I did through this great book by Drs. John Burke and Brad Pintry. It's a great resource for studying the Old Testament. So the word kippur translates more closely to purgation, purification, or expiation. And then that process then brings about atonement. And when we look at the word atonement, we can break it down into at one meant, which really is another way of saying reconciliation between God and man. What was separated is now brought to one, and that is that relationship between God and humanity. And one of the primary ways that this happens in this rite is through the sprinkling of the blood of the sacrifices on the mercy seat of the Ark of the Covenant. The mercy seat is the lid to the Ark of the Covenant that the two angels on the top of the lid are facing each other. And in the Old Testament, God would appear to Moses primarily, and then presumably the high priest, in that mercy seat. So the Day of Atonement then was the definitive ritual that both cleansed and reconsecrated or made holy the priests, the people, and the sanctuary for the Jewish people. And again, as I said in Leviticus 16, God is giving the instructions on this ritual, on the parts of this ritual. So there's three key sections to this ritual. First, the high priest would enter into the innermost sanctum of the tabernacle. Now, the tabernacle was the tent that the Jewish people had that housed the Ark of the Covenant and what we call the Holy of Holies that traveled with them throughout the desert. And the tabernacle tent also was anticipating and prefiguring the temple in Jerusalem. So the first part of the ritual is the high priest would enter into the innermost sanctum of the tabernacle, and that innermost sanctum then is the Holy of Holies. And this would be done once per year. Secondly, he was to offer a bull as a sin offering for himself. And this is an interesting little detail because, according to Burke and Pintry, this is presumably as a kind of penance, personal penance, that harkens back to the worship of the golden calf by the original high priest, Aaron, and all his successors. Third, the high priest would then take two goats. One goat, which would be for the Lord, would be offered up in sacrifice as a sin offering. The second goat, which we call the scapegoat, that would not be sacrificed, but rather would be sent into the wilderness, into the desert. So on this day, Aaron, and then later his successors, was commanded to enter the tabernacle, or the tent, in the cloud of incense. And remember, the cloud was the presence of God. And so that implies that God is present in this sacrifice, in this ritual. And he would make atonement for the people, and then symbolically communicate the sins of the people to the scapegoat. That's the goat that gets sent into the wilderness, so that it might bear all the iniquities of the people. So this is the structure of the Day of Atonement. What we'll talk about in our next video is how we see this fulfilled in the person of Christ, and then in his passion and his death and his resurrection, and that we would then participate in through the Mass. So I look forward to talking with you in our next video. God bless.